A firefighter parked his rescue truck at home after saving families from a devastating storm and woke to a $500 fine from the HOA. The president, Richard Kerr, known for targeting emergency vehicles, doubled down without remorse. But Captain Mike Dawson had a legal maneuver that turned Kerr's own rules against him and lit up the entire neighborhood in the process. Just wait until you see how this fight for justice unfolded. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Captain Mike Dawson had seen plenty of disasters in his 20-plus years with the fire service. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires, you name it. But nothing prepared him for waking up to a fine on a fire truck. Mike led Station 6 in a small Florida coastal town where neighbors still looked out for one another and volunteers made up half the first responders. Their battered 2005 Pierce pumper, engine 17, had been through it all. Scratches in the paint, a dented rear bumper, and a long record of lives saved. When the latest tropical storm stalled offshore, it pummeled the town for 36 relentless hours. Mike and his crew barely had time to breathe, pulling families from attic windows, clearing fallen oaks from flooded roads, pumping out retirement homes and shuttling dialysis patients to shelters. They worked through the night and well into the next day, soaked to the bone and running on caffeine and grit. By the time the worst had passed, the fire station itself had lost power. The backup generator, an old temperamental unit, sputtered and died. Department policy was clear. If a station lost power during an active emergency, the primary engine was to be safeguarded at a crew member's residence until operations stabilized. Mike lived in a raised home with a long driveway out of the flood zone, a perfect temporary shelter for engine 17. He drove it home at dawn and parked it in front of the garage. Exhausted, soaked, and running on empty, he climbed the stairs and collapsed into bed for a few precious hours of sleep. When sunlight finally woke him, Mike stumbled out to make coffee and froze. There, under the blazing Florida sun, a bright orange paper flapped on the windshield of engine 17. Improper commercial vehicle storage, $500 fine, must be removed immediately. Mike rubbed his eyes, sure he was seeing things. The street still had puddles 3 inches deep. Sandbags leaned against doorways. His neighbors' homes bore the mud-streaked marks of the storm. And there stood a fire engine, clearly marked fire and rescue, still streaked with storm debris, parked not out of neglect but out of necessity. His gut told him who had done it even before he checked the signature. Richard Kerr, HOA president, a retired insurance executive who often called the firehouse equipment an eyesore. More than once, Kerr had tried to pass new HOA rules to limit commercial and government vehicles in the neighborhood, even emergency ones. Mike stared at the violation notice, pulse rising. This can't be real, he thought. Not after what we just did for this community. The phone call that started war. With shaking hands he dialed Kerr's number. The man picked up on the second ring. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson," Kerr said smoothly. "How can I help you?" Mike kept his tone even. "Richard, I'm looking at a $500 fine you signed for parking our rescue truck. We're still on emergency operations. The station lost power. We followed county protocol." There was a pause. Then Kerr's voice came through, cool as ever. "It's against our bylaws, Mr. Dawson. Emergency or not, we must preserve the community aesthetic." Mike felt his jaw clench. He wanted to shout, but years of command experience held him in check. "Understood," he said tightly. He ended the call, his heart thudding. A man who had hidden indoors while firefighters braved floodwaters was now finding their truck in the middle of an ongoing disaster response. As Mike stood there staring at the orange slip flapping in the breeze, one thought settled cold and hard in his mind. This was not over. The crew's fury. News traveled fast at Station 6. By the time Captain Mike Dawson returned to the firehouse that afternoon, the violation notice had already made the rounds. He found his crew gathered in the kitchen, worn from the storm but wide awake now, with adrenaline fueled not by emergency calls, but by outrage. Paramedic Laura Bishop paced near the coffee machine. When Mike walked in, she turned, eyes blazing. "He find a rescue truck? We pulled 3 families from the flood last night," she snapped, slamming her mug onto the counter. Engineer Tom O'Neill shook his head grimly. "I told you Kerr always hated us. Said we lowered home values with that unsightly engine." Mike exhaled slowly. "I already called him." He was smug about it. A tense silence followed. Everyone in the room knew Richard Kerr. The man had fought the department at every turn, opposing training drills in the neighborhood, lobbying to restrict emergency vehicle parking, and once even trying to block siren tests. But finding the truck now, after a declared state of emergency, after they'd risked their lives for neighbors, that crossed a line no one could ignore. Mike, a man known for patience and level-headed command, weighed his next move carefully. "We'll start by giving him a way out," he said at last. The professional response. That evening he drafted a calm, professional email to the HOA board. He attached photos of Engine 17 pulling children from flooded porches, a time-stamped shot of its waterlogged tires still in service the morning after the storm. He cited Florida state statutes and federal protections for emergency vehicles under active disaster response. He highlighted county protocols that required relocation of fire apparatus when stations lost power. He ended the email with a polite request. "I respectfully ask the HOA to rescind this citation in light of the documented emergency and the public service provided." He hit send, hoping reason might still prevail. The reply came the next morning. One line, no greeting, no signature block. "We enforce community rules consistently. No exceptions." The words burned in Mike's chest. No exceptions. Even for a rescue truck, even in a disaster zone. When he read the response aloud to his crew, the room filled with low muttering. Resentment hardened into something darker. The department had always known Kerr was difficult. But now he was attacking the very people who had just saved his neighbors' lives. Mike tried to stay focused. He would escalate through official channels if needed. He would not let the crew's anger explode just yet. Then 2 days later, another envelope arrived. Mike opened it with a sinking feeling. Additional $250 per day continuing violation. No warning, no discussion. By the week's end, the fine would top $1,000 for doing exactly what department policy required in a declared emergency. Mike read the letter twice, fingers tightening on the edges of the paper. This wasn't about community aesthetics anymore. This was personal, a deliberate show of power. He folded the notice carefully and slid it into a file. Then he looked at Laura and Tom, who were watching him across the room. "Enough," he said quietly. The firehouse wasn't boiling over just yet, but beneath the surface, hatred was simmering and it wouldn't stay contained much longer. The plan forms. That night, after another long shift clearing down power lines and checking on elderly residents, Mike returned to the station, bone-tired but restless. He found his crew gathered around the break room table, Laura, Tom, and a few others. The orange violation notices were already laid out in front of them as if the paper itself had weight. Mike pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I'm done playing nice," he said, voice low but firm. "This isn't about me anymore. He's not just messing with a captain. He's disrespecting every firefighter in this county." The room fell quiet. They all knew what he meant. Laura leaned forward, eyes steady. "What can we do? He's hiding behind HOA rules. We can't just storm in there." Mike gave a thin smile, cold, controlled. "We fight back with something even he can't ignore." The crew listened closely as Mike laid out the facts. He'd spent the afternoon reviewing state disaster codes and county ordinances, and one detail stood out. Florida law required that all HOA communities maintain clear, unobstructed emergency access after a declared disaster. That included proper lighting along any communal fencing bordering public roadways so first responders could navigate safely at night. And Kerr's beloved wooden perimeter fence. Not only was it unlit, it was also partially blocked by mature trees that had grown over the past few years in violation of both fire access and visibility codes. "He wants to play by the book," Mike said quietly. "Fine, we'll hand him the book, page by page." The crew's eyes lit up with understanding. Setting the trap. Without wasting time, Mike placed a call to the county fire inspector, a man who respected Station 6 and had seen firsthand what their crew had done during the storm. Mike laid out the situation clearly. An unlit, partially obstructed fence along a key emergency access road. "We've got documented proof," he added. "And with the declared state of emergency still active, this needs to be addressed immediately." The inspector agreed. An official inspection was scheduled within 48 hours. When the citation came down, multiple violations for a non-compliant fencing and failure to maintain required visibility. Kerr was reportedly furious. Emails flew through the HOA board, but legally there was no wiggle room. And then came the next move. Mike's station, operating fully within the law and in partnership with county emergency services, offered to assist in temporary compliance until the HOA could fund a permanent fix. It was a professional gesture, but one that came with a twist. "We'll provide portable flood lighting to ensure visibility until full compliance is verified," Mike told the county office, documenting everything. When the permits came through, the crew set their plan in motion. The night the neighborhood lit up. That Saturday evening, as twilight fell over the neighborhood, Engine 17 and a ladder truck rolled up alongside the long stretch of Kerr's prized wooden fence. Residents peeked from their windows as firefighters, helmets gleaming, uniforms crisp, unloaded 6 massive portable rescue floodlights, the kind used to illuminate multi-lane highway crashes at midnight. One by one, the lights were raised and powered on. Within minutes, Kerr's entire perimeter fence was bathed in brilliant white light, visible from blocks away. Every crack, every weathered board, every overhanging branch stood out as if under a spotlight. It looked less like a private estate and more like the sidelines of a major sporting event. And this time, the HOA couldn't say a word because the fire department was in full compliance with both the inspector's directive and the law. As Engine 17 idled quietly by the curb, Mike stood beside it, arms folded, watching the glow wash over Kerr's once pristine facade. You wanted consistency, he thought. Now you've got it in high definition. The spectacle begins. It didn't take long for word to spread. As the massive floodlights flickered to life that Saturday evening, one by one, curious residents began emerging from their homes. Porch lights clicked on, front doors swung open, neighbors gathered in small groups along the sidewalk, drawn to the surreal sight just beyond their driveways. Kerr's once pristine wooden privacy fence, the pride of the HOA, carefully maintained for years, now glowed under the glare of 6 industrial rescue lights. Every knot and nail stood out in stark relief. The surrounding trees, once cloaked in shadow, looked as though a movie set had been staged in the middle of the neighborhood, and Kerr's carefully sculpted landscaping, bathed in 50,000 lumens of harsh white light bright enough to make sunglasses advisable, even at night. The effect was almost comical, but there was no mocking from the firefighters. Dressed in department polos, helmets off, they moved calmly and professionally along the fence line. Laura and Tom handed out county fire safety leaflets to the gathering crowd. Each flyer explained the state law requiring clear emergency access and perimeter lighting after disasters and how these measures protected residents. We're just ensuring compliance, Laura said warmly to one neighbor who shook her head in disbelief. Going viral. It didn't take long for the scene to attract wider attention. A local CBS affiliate van rolled up before midnight. The reporter wasted no time. Lights, cameras, and soon a headline that would ripple far beyond the neighborhood. Firefighters illuminate HOA fence after President finds rescue truck. By morning, footage of the flood-lit fence and the smiling Station 6 crew was all over social media. But what truly fueled public outrage was the juxtaposed footage. Clips of Engine 17 rescuing stranded families from the storm just days earlier paired with the absurd reality of the subsequent HOA fine. Neighbors posted comments. Out-of-town viewers shared the story nationwide. By Monday, the pressure was impossible to ignore. The community reacts. Calls poured into the HOA office. Residents demanded answers. The county commissioner issued a pointed public statement praising Station 6 and reminding all local HOAs of their duty to support, not obstruct, emergency responders. Faced with growing legal and public heat and a very public stain on their reputation, the HOA board met in emergency session. Meanwhile, the fence stayed perfectly illuminated. Every single night. Kerr's prized wooden barrier continued to glow like a beacon visible from 3 blocks away. Cars began slowing down to gawk. Teenagers started taking selfies in front of the blazing fence. Local radio DJs made jokes about the Lighthouse HOA. One popular comment thread on Facebook read, "This is what happens when you mess with heroes. That fence looks like a maximum security prison now. Perfect for Kerr. Our firefighters deserve better than this garbage. Vote this clown out of the HOA immediately." The story was being shared faster than Mike could keep track of. News vans from 3 different stations camped out near the fence during prime viewing hours. Kerr's terrible decision. By Wednesday, Richard Kerr was feeling the heat from all sides. HOA board members were getting angry calls from residents. Property values were actually being discussed negatively, not because of fire trucks, but because of the circus surrounding the illuminated fence. That's when Kerr made his biggest mistake. He called a press conference. Standing in front of his blazing fence, squinting against the harsh industrial lights, he tried to defend his position to a gaggle of reporters and cameras. Rules are rules, he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the evening breeze. We can't make exceptions just because someone wears a uniform. This community has standards. Behind him, the fence glowed like a prison yard, casting harsh shadows across his face. The optics couldn't have been worse. A wealthy retiree in an expensive polo shirt complaining about emergency responders while literally standing in the spotlight of his own making. So you're saying you'd fine police officers too? One reporter pressed. I'm saying we enforce our bylaws equally, Kerr replied stiffly. Even after they save lives in a natural disaster? Community standards don't have exceptions. The interview was a disaster. Within hours, clips of Kerr's tone-deaf comments were circulating online with hashtags like #FenceGate and #FirefighterSupport. The pressure mounts. Local businesses started putting up signs supporting Station 6. "We back our firefighters" appeared in shop windows throughout town. A local brewery announced they were donating proceeds from their weekend sales to the fire department's equipment fund. The State Firefighters Union issued a statement condemning punitive actions against emergency personnel performing their sworn duties during declared disasters. Mike found himself fielding calls from reporters, other fire departments, and even a few lawyers offering to represent the station pro bono. But he kept his responses measured and professional. "We're just doing our job," he told Channel 7 News. Both in emergency response and in ensuring public safety compliance. Meanwhile, the lights stayed on. Every single night. Kerr's fence continued to glow, drawing more gawkers, photographers, and media attention by the day. The breaking point. By Thursday, the HOA board was in full crisis mode. 3 board members had received enough angry calls from residents that they were considering resignation. The community Facebook page was flooded with demands for Kerr's removal. Real estate agents were reporting that potential home buyers were asking questions about that HOA that fines firefighters. Property showing appointments were being canceled. The final straw came when a local news station ran a follow-up story featuring interviews with the families Engine 17 had rescued during the storm. Tearful parents talked about watching firefighters carry their children to safety through chest-deep water. An elderly man described how the crew had pumped water out of his living room and helped evacuate his bedridden wife. "These men and women risked their lives for us," sobbed Maria Santos, holding her 6-year-old daughter who had been pulled from their attic. "And then they get punished for it? That's not the community I want to live in." The surrender. That Thursday afternoon, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. By a vote of 6-1, the board overruled Kerr's fines. An official letter arrived at Station 6 within hours. After careful review of the circumstances surrounding the emergency vehicle citation, the HOA board has voted to rescind all fines in full. No further action is required. The board extends its sincere appreciation to Station 6 for their service to our community during the recent emergency. The letter was signed by every board member except Richard Kerr, whose signature line was notably absent. Mike read it aloud to his crew, who cheered and applauded. But their captain held up a hand. "The lights stay up until the county inspector signs off that we're in full compliance," he said with a grin. "We're thorough like that." The perfect irony. The portable floodlights remained in place for 2 more weeks, ensuring full compliance was achieved on Kerr's dime. The county inspector took his time with the final approval, thoroughly documenting every aspect of the emergency access improvements. Residents continued to drive by each evening, some honking supportively, others stopping to take photos with the illuminated fence in the background. Local teenagers made it a hangout spot. The fence became an unofficial landmark. "Meet me at the bright fence" became a common phrase in the neighborhood. Then, on a quiet Tuesday evening exactly 13 days after the lights went up, the universe delivered the most perfect piece of irony anyone could have asked for. Mike was at home, grilling burgers for his family, when his radio crackled to life. "Station 6, structure fire, Maple Grove subdivision, possible fence fire spreading to residential." The address made Mike's blood freeze. Maple Grove. Kerr Street. Engine 17 responding, he radioed back, already running for his truck. When Mike arrived at the scene, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Richard Kerr's prized wooden fence, the same fence that had been glowing under floodlights for nearly 2 weeks, was indeed on fire. A section about 50 feet long was engulfed in flames, orange tongues licking hungrily toward Kerr's manicured landscaping in the corner of his house. The irony was almost too perfect to be real. Mike found Kerr standing on his front lawn in a bathrobe and slippers, panic written across his face as he watched his precious fence burning. When Kerr spotted the familiar figure of Captain Dawson climbing down from Engine 17, his face went pale. "Please," Kerr called out, his voice cracking. "Please help me. I know we've had our differences, but—" Mike held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. For a moment he just stood there, watching the flames dance along the fence line. The same fence that had been the center of their battle. The same fence that had cost him $1,000 in fines. The crew was already unrolling hoses, setting up for suppression. Laura looked at Mike questioningly, waiting for orders. Mike could have paused. Could have made Kerr sweat a little longer. Could have reminded him about community aesthetics and consistent rule enforcement. Instead, he did what every firefighter is trained to do. "Get 2 lines on that fence, protect the exposures," he barked to his crew. "Tom, get the ladder truck positioned for roof access if the fire spreads. Laura, check for any injured residents." For the next hour, Station 6 fought to save the very fence they'd been forced to illuminate. The same fence that had caused all the trouble was now literally burning, and the same firefighters who'd been fined for parking their truck were risking their lives to save it. When the last ember was extinguished and the scene was secure, Kerr approached Mike cautiously. His expensive fence was now a charred, smoking ruin. Half of it was completely gone, reduced to ash and blackened posts. "Captain Dawson," Kerr said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. After everything I put you through, you still came. You still saved my home." Mike looked at the destroyed fence, then back at Kerr. "It's what we do, Richard. Emergency or not, fire truck fine or not. We don't let people burn." Kerr's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong. The investigation. Captain Dawson, I cannot express my gratitude enough for what you and your crew did last night. After the way I treated you, you had every right to let my fence burn to the ground. But you didn't. You risked your lives to save my property, just like you saved our neighbors during the storm. I've learned a lesson I should have learned long ago. Firefighters aren't just employees or civil servants. You're heroes. And heroes deserve respect, not fines. I'm resigning from the HOA board effective immediately. I've also made a $10,000 donation to Station 6's Equipment Fund. Thank you for showing me what real community service looks like. With deepest respect and apology, Richard Kerr." But the story wasn't over yet. The fire marshal's investigation into the fence fire revealed something interesting. The blaze had started from an electrical fault in the very flood lighting system that had been illuminating Kerr's fence. One of the portable generators powering the lights had overheated and sparked, igniting the dry wooden fence posts. The same lights that had embarrassed Kerr for 2 weeks had ultimately destroyed the fence they were meant to illuminate. When Mike heard the fire marshal's report, he couldn't help but smile. The universe had a sense of humor after all. The community response. Word of the fence fire and Kerr's apology spread through the neighborhood faster than the flames had spread along his fence line. Residents were amazed by the poetic justice of it all, but even more impressed by how Station 6 had responded. "They could have just let it burn," said Maria Santos, now the HOA president. "After everything Kerr put them through, no one would have blamed them. But they fought for his property like it was their own families." Local businesses started selling T-shirts with Station 6, from floodlights to firefights, printed on them. The fire department's annual fundraiser that year broke all previous records, raising enough money for new equipment and facility improvements. The burned section of Kerr's fence became a neighborhood talking point. Instead of rebuilding it immediately, Kerr left it as a charred reminder of his mistakes for several months. Eventually he did rebuild, but with a new addition, a small plaque that read, "In appreciation of Station 6 and all emergency responders." The aftermath. Richard Kerr resigned from the HOA board 2 weeks after the lights came down, citing personal and family reasons. His departure was met with applause at the next community meeting. His replacement was Maria Santos, the mother whose daughter had been rescued by Engine 17. Her first order of business was passing a resolution formally supporting all emergency responders and establishing a community appreciation fund for Station 6. The resolution passed unanimously. Kerr put his house on the market 3 months later and moved to a different state. Neighbors reported that he seemed to have developed a nervous twitch whenever fire sirens sounded in the distance. The legacy. For Station 6, the victory wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about establishing respect for the people who risked their lives to protect their community. The story became legendary in fire service circles, told in firehouses across the country as an example of how to fight bureaucracy with bureaucracy. Mike was invited to speak at the State Firefighters Convention about community relations and legal advocacy. His talk was standing room only. One quiet evening after everything had returned to normal, Mike walked into the station to find Laura waiting near the kitchen table, a small gift-wrapped box in her hands. "For you, Cap," she said with a grin. Mike opened it and laughed. Inside sat a sleek custom plaque etched in brass, Engine 17 lighting the way for justice. He held it up for the crew who cheered softly. Mike smiled, eyes twinkling. "Well, crew, sometimes you fight fire with fire. The final word." The plaque hangs in Station 6 to this day, mounted on the wall where everyone can see it. New recruits always ask about it, and the story gets told again with maybe a few embellishments added over the years. Engine 17 still responds to calls, still saves lives, still gets scratched and dented in the line of duty. But it's never gotten another parking ticket. The neighborhood learned an important lesson about respecting the people who protect them. And somewhere in Florida, whenever HOA presidents get a little too big for their britches, someone inevitably tells them the story of Richard Kerr and the fence that wouldn't stop glowing. As for Mike Dawson, he's still fighting fires, still leading his crew, still parking fire trucks wherever department policy requires. But now when he does, he sometimes chuckles and thinks about that bright orange violation notice that started it all. Because sometimes justice isn't just served cold. Sometimes it's served at 50,000 lumens, visible from 3 blocks away, and bright enough to light up an entire community's understanding of what really matters.